it! Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday, you said tomorrow, so just do it! Make your dreams come true! Just do it!
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. This episode is brought to you by Praxis. Guys, if you've been listening for a while and you're inspired to drop out, grind, and succeed and to start turning your dreams into reality, Praxis helps you go from student to startup in just 9 months, okay? To land your dream job or to start your own company, you don't need to sit in more classrooms or blast out resumes or go through years of training. You can start today. Praxis combines a 3-month professional bootcamp with a 6-month paid apprenticeship at a startup that leads directly to a full-time job. And startups aren't just for coders, by the way. There's sales positions, marketing, operations. Even if you're not sure what you're interested in, Praxis places you with a growing, dynamic company where you get paid to do work you love to do, where you get to become part of a team, and where you learn how to create value. It's not just an internship, it's real work. In addition to the apprenticeship, you complete an intensive education program that combines professional development training, skill building projects, and one-on-one coaching. You'll leave the program with a full-time job offer and the skills and experiences you'll need to work for any company that you want to work for or to even start your own company. No degree is required to get started on your career, guys. Whether you're an ambitious go-getter right out of high school, a creative thinker who's bored in college, or a college grad looking forward to something better than more school or a cubicle job, Praxis is a phenomenal resource for you. $50,000. Okay, $50,000 is the average salary that Praxis graduates are getting with these full-time jobs that they get right after the program in less than a year. If you want to learn more, go to discoverpraxis.com, discoverpraxis.com, and let them know that you found out about them through Successful Dropout and start turning your dreams into reality, guys. And with that being said, let's get to the show. What is up, Successful Dropouts? Get stoked because today on the show we have Tim Chermak. Tim is the co-founder of Platform, a digital marketing agency for real estate professionals. He's also the author of Main Street Marketing and High Hanging Fruit. Tim is passionate about entrepreneurship, marketing, liberty, and Chipotle burritos, as am I, my friend.
Awesome. Awesome. Then we'll be
Tim,
friends.
But that's the intro I have for you, man. But tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Well, I'm one of those guys who every time I go to Chipotle, I know the guac is extra and I'm going to get it every single time. So that's just how I try to live my life. I'm 25 years old. I feel really old saying that because for some reason in my head, I always think that I'm 21 or 22 still, but I'm 25 now. And I dropped out of college a couple years ago and started a marketing consulting business. In college, I think I was bored. I mean, there's not like a really deep philosophical answer to that. I was bored, and I think like intuitively, like so many other people, I just knew that, okay, I'm spending just hours and hours every day writing papers and researching papers and studying, for multiple choice tests that like I'm never going to use this information again. And I finally got sick of it. And I just decided to launch my own business. So I started a marketing consulting business. And as I say that, you probably think like, oh, so you had a business plan and you got a bank loan, and did you open up like a shop with an actual like physical location? You probably had a website, business cards. Mm-hmm. No. When I say I started a marketing consulting business, I mean that I basically went door to door to local brick and mortar businesses, like small businesses in my hometown back in Minnesota. It's a small town in like the middle of Minnesota. We have about 25,000 people. And,
oh, wow.
So I'm going to like local used car dealerships and coffee shops and health wellness stores. I went to a couple real estate brokers. I talked to financial advisors. I mean, basically anyone that would take a meeting with me. I would literally walk in unannounced and just say like, hey, I'm Tim. I do marketing for a living, and I have a couple ideas for you. Like, would you like to schedule a meeting next week? That's basically what I would say. And the goal was just to get the meeting, because I knew they weren't going to meet with me right there, but I just tried to get meetings. And eventually, I think I talked to 12 local business owners, and every single one of them said no. And some of them took multiple meetings. Like, they actually met me. They liked what I had to say, which kind of gave me a false sense of hope. And then they scheduled another meeting. And there were some that even scheduled a third meeting. So at this point, I'm like, all right, I got this. This is my first client, And then they wouldn't hire me. But finally, I got someone to say yes. And it happened to be actually a real estate broker. And it was really kind of my first real client. And I think I was 22 at the time. And I helped her like very, very quickly accelerate her business. Very, very quickly. And that became kind of the case study that I needed. And now like a couple years later, I actually own a national company where we have like, I think 7 employees now. And we're a digital marketing firm that actually focuses on working with realtors. So just kind of by accident, I stumbled into this niche, and I found out I was actually really good at it. And we ended up kind of launching a company around that. So we have like a software programmer on staff now who's my business partner. And so he has built a full-blown software suite that we use. So we're kind of like a hybrid marketing agency and a software company. So
is this software that your clients use, or that you use kind of on the back end?
Both.
I see.
It's really kind of a CRM. It's a marketing software that allows us to do like retargeting. We use it to build out all the online funnels, the landing pages, the email follow-up. We can use it to send text messages and have, text conversations with leads. It's a full-blown, it's basically like an in-house version of Infusionsoft that we built specifically for our purposes, because we couldn't really find anything out there that we liked. So we just built it ourselves.
Does that have a lot to do with just the being specifically in the niche of real estate?
Honestly, no. We just thought that all the other options out there. So I don't know like how familiar that like your listeners are with marketing software, but there's HubSpot, Infusionsoft, even like Salesforce, and like all of those solutions. There's Entreport, there's Lead Pages. All those are great, but they had way more features than we needed. And then there was always some really, really important features that they didn't have. And what we ended up doing as we were planning this out was we just realized that we had to basically build something from scratch, or else what we were going to end up doing is having one piece of software that's, fairly expensive actually, that we have to buy a bunch of like additional plugins for and jerry rig it together and kind of cross our fingers and hope everything, is syncing properly. So
I see. So you built something super specific to your needs, and then you said your co-founder was the developer, so you had the talent on board already.
Yeah, and he was my cousin, so it worked out nicely. Yeah. I actually started the company, and I had it to around probably I was doing about $10K a month in profit, which when I was 22, I was like a baller.
Oh, that was at 22.
Yeah, so I'm like 22 years old, dropped out, making over $100,000 a year, which basically to me was like I'm basically like a professional athlete at this point. I can buy whatever I want, right? Like I had no expenses because I was actually still living at home, like with my mom.
Oh man!
So I'm making like way more money than she is even, and I'm 22. I was a moron. I went out and bought a brand new Cadillac when I couldn't afford it still, and I'm buying new clothes and new laptop and like taking vacations. I was a total idiot, but. I started this company then, and then that income went to almost zero pretty fast because obviously, I had to bring my cousin on board who is a software developer, and he had to develop this new software system, and I kind of couldn't keep doing what I was doing because we had to retool the whole company around this, marketing software focus. And it was basically, honestly, a crash course in entrepreneurship. One of the big lessons I learned from that is like business plans are all but worthless because you can't really plan out what's going to happen once you actually engage with the market, So I'm actually really glad that we didn't waste the time, in my opinion, making, a 50-page business plan, because it all would have been worthless right away. So for the first 2 years, honestly, I don't think we ever eclipsed $3,000 to $4,000 a month in revenue.
Between the two of you.
Yeah. So I went from making 10 grand a month doing my own kind of freelance consulting thing to starting this digital marketing software company. And I go from 10 grand to making like 2 grand a month. And this lasted for basically 2 years. And finally, my business partner, who I said is my cousin, his name's Aaron, awesome guy. He just confronted me and is like, hey man, like I quit my job as like a head software developer where I was making like a pretty good salary to, launch this business with you. And it's been basically 2 years and we're hardly making any money. And he said, if we can't grow this at least above $5,000 a month in revenue, and keep in mind that's being split between two people, right?
Right. Yeah.
If we can't grow this at least beyond $5,000 in the next, I think he said the next 2 months or something like that, I'm going to have to quit and find a new job. So he wasn't even saying, hey, we have to get this to 20 grand a month or something. He just wanted to see a little bit of momentum.
Just pay the bills.
Yeah, just so we had a sense of hope.
Right.
And his wife was paying the bills for him the whole time. His wife was an RN, so she had a decent, solid job. And if that weren't the case, he wouldn't have been allowed really to launch this with me, because I was still living at home this whole time. So
I see.
I could take basically $1,000 a month, and it was fine, because I didn't really have expenses. But long story short, something happened, and we just got serious, and really we had nothing to lose. I mean, that's what it was. Is I knew, okay, if something doesn't change in the next couple months, this whole thing's done. So what we decided to do, just again because we had nothing to lose, it wasn't part of a grander, business strategy or master plan. We decided to raise the price of what we were doing from $300 a month as kind of like a SaaS, software as a service business model, to $1,500 a month, and kind of shift the business model, from being a software company to being like a digital marketing firm that just happens to have its own software.
Right.
That makes sense. And so at the $1,500 a month level, we knew that we could spend a lot more time with our clients, split testing things, and just actually kind of being consultants with them, rather than just being a software company where people pay us a flat rate every month and there's not a lot of engagement beyond them just, using the software, right? And things took off. By the end of that year, he had this conversation with me in May. So basically what he was saying was, hey, if things don't turn around by July, I'm going to quit, Yeah. And I still don't blame him at all, because I'm frankly shocked he didn't tell me that earlier, because it took us 2 years to figure this out. But by the end of that year, we were, I think we were at 10 to 15K a month.
Okay.
And then, which still isn't amazing, but at least we had enough money to pay our bills. And then early that next year, we got to the point where we were closer to 20-25 a month in recurring revenue. So that was enough to where now both of us were making over $10,000 a month. And, it was something that I said, okay, cool. This is kind of actually like a business at this point. This is what I set out to create. And now 3 years later, I think, since we launched it, or maybe 3.5 years, we're doing over $50,000 a month. And in hindsight, it's this is the point we wanted to get to, where we're not making $4,000 a month, but 50. So,
right.
Yeah. I mean, if there's one thing I can tell you looking back, it's that we should have we should have engaged in more experiments early on, rather than grasping at straws for the first 2 years with a failed business model, because everything we did those first 2 years that made it so hard, we spent all of our time just stressing out, trying to basically manage the symptoms of the fact that we had a bad business model. I mean, nothing we could have done in hindsight would have changed the fact that we had a bad business model charging $300 a month. And for that amount of money, we just couldn't afford to deliver the level of service that people wanted to get results. And paradoxically, at $1,500 a month, which is obviously 5 times the amount, we could, because now we could afford to spend a lot more time with every client and actually
make a
get
difference.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds weird, but people were getting better results at $1,500 a month than when we were charging $300.
Yeah, well, and there's probably also, I mean, I know there's also a psychological thing there, even with the pricing, where when you have it priced high, people expect, the high value, whereas too low can be really tempting to think, they're getting ripped off. Yep,
absolutely. So that's what I was very, very, I should say now I am very consciously aware that I was extremely stressed out for 2 years of my life because I was trying to optimize a bad business model. And that's basically a logical impossibility. I mean, if at the root of your business, kind of the core of your business, if your actual business model is kind of inherently flawed, nothing you can do is going to really grow that business. So in the business we have now, like whenever we hit a plateau or we hit a challenge, I step back and look at the big picture and I ask myself, like, is there some assumption I'm making that I'm taking for granted, that we're trying to optimize all these dependent variables when instead are there independent variables that we could be looking at that we're taking for granted, in our actual business model. So that has served me very well after learning that lesson.
Now, going back to those 2 years where you're barely kind of cracking $3,000 and you had that conversation with your business partner, was there ever a time when you thought about, throwing in the towel? I mean, I know you kept kind of beating your head against the wall with your current model, but did you ever even think about switching to something completely different?
Totally. And I think any entrepreneur who says otherwise is a total liar. Because if you're making $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month, in a technical sense, you have enough to, eat some ramen and whatnot, but like, it's no fun and it's stressful because, you're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and that's far less than minimum wage. Right. So it's actually kind of funny how like literally could have gone and worked at McDonald's and made more money per hour than I was making, doing that. And because keep in mind, I was already making $10K a month before I launched this kind of marketing software.
So you knew it was possible.
So in the back of my mind, I was like, I could quit this any day and go back and start making $10K a month. But the reason I wanted to build this was because this was actually kind of a recurring business model. So I knew if I could get this going, if I could get this going to where I'm making $10K a month from this, then I could go do my other like freelance consulting stuff on the side. And now I'm making $20K, but that $10K is there every month as a recurring, because it's an actual business that exists independent of me. Right. So I don't have to be working on it 50 hours a week. And now it's obviously much more beyond that. But there was the constant temptation to, hey, I should just quit this and go back to doing what I was doing because I was making pretty good money doing that. So, But, I'm glad I learned this at a young age. Like, I'm glad I did this when I was 21, 22, and not when I was 30, because I'm 25 now. And, I don't say this to be, cocky or arrogant or whatever, but I have much more entrepreneurial experience, business experience, marketing experience, just people experience, dealing with people, whether it was my business partner, my employees now, our clients, vendors, I have much more experience because of this entrepreneurial journey than most business people have by the time they're even 40.
Yeah.
Because I really do believe that when most people that are, let's say, 45, they say that, oh, I have 20 years of experience in such and such industry. In reality, most of them actually have like 1 year of like unique, genuine experience that they've just repeated 20 times. And those are not the same thing. I can actually say that every year, since high school, I have done something totally, completely different. I've confronted new challenges. So, in basically, what has it been now, 4 years since I dropped out of college, those 4 years have been actual 4 years of legitimate learning and experience. So I'm only 25 and it's like, cool. If I keep doing this and I keep challenging myself and we keep, growing the business and exploring maybe different verticals we can go into beyond real estate, or we, broaden our knowledge beyond, Facebook ads, which is what we specialize in right now. We could be in a totally different, even cooler place when I'm 30, and that's definitely a piece of advice I would give your listeners. If you're listening to this and you're 18 or you're 21 or you're 24 or you're 31, really think about, are you just living the same year over and over again, going through the motions, or are you actually, challenging yourself and picking up like legitimate years of experience? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That's such a great point. And also for our listeners, I'd love you to go back. I want to go back to the beginning when you said you first started knocking on doors.
Yeah.
And that, did you know anything about marketing at that point? Had you had any experience?
Yeah. So I had some experience because I worked on some campaigns for a guy who was running for U.S. Congress. But very honestly, I didn't really have experience working with small businesses, which is what I was doing. So the biggest thing in hindsight that I had working against me was the fact that I had no case studies or testimonials.
Right.
So like they would ask me, oh, do you have any proof that this works or that you've done this before or that you know what you're doing, right? And it was kind of like, no, but don't you see how this would make sense and how it would work intuitively? And in hindsight, if I could do it all over again, what I would honestly do is I would go find a client that I know 100% that I can make a difference for. Like I would find someone, I was confident in myself, to be clear. I knew that I could create results for people because what I'd done is I'd gone out and spent like, hundreds of dollars on Amazon, and I had bought like every book I could find on the topic of small business marketing and lead generation and, how to cultivate and convert more leads. So just because of the self-education, I had even bought conference tickets, and I was going to like small business marketing seminars around the country. I kind of put myself on a self-education course on small business marketing and lead generation. So I was I was actually very confident that I knew what I was doing, but I had no external proof or case studies to show these business owners. So in hindsight, what I would have done is just found one client that I knew that I could create great results for, where it would be like a hell of a case study. And I would have done everything for free. And I would have just told them up front, hey, here's the deal. I know this is going to work and I need a case study. So I will do everything for you for free in exchange for you, you like writing out a great case study white paper or filming a video case study for me after I get you all these results, and if I had to, because I've almost done this before, like I would offer to pay them $500 if it doesn't work. So literally the worst case scenario is they make $500, because that tells them that you're confident. Yeah. But I didn't do that. So it took me so long to finally find my first client. And luckily for me, I think I just have that hustle gene. Like I have that persistence. But I think a lot of people would have quit well before that. And because I almost did. I got really, really frustrated. So in hindsight, I would have just found one client that I could make a big, big difference for. I would do it for free. Because once you have even one case study, man, like one testimonial, it gets a lot easier because now people don't have to just trust you with blind faith. They can call that person, and say, for example, hey, this Tim guy, is he legit? Like, does he actually know what he's doing? And all they need is one person to tell them, yeah, Tim's awesome. It really worked. Right. And what they're going to say is, oh, well, maybe I'll give it a try. So Yeah. I mean, one case study is often really all you need to start picking up kind of a snowball effect of clients where it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and what I love about what you were just talking about is the fact that you kind of outlined your own curriculum to be able to learn this stuff. I feel like a lot of people listening have this feeling, and I don't blame you because it's the system that we grew up in, that you have to get your degree, you have to get these certain credentials before somebody will take you seriously if you're to approach them with a service or a product like you did.
No, all people care about in the real world, in the business world, is what can you do for them.
They care about results.
Yeah. I can honestly tell you that no one has ever asked me when I was in, a marketing pitch or a sales meeting trying to get someone to hire me, right? No one has ever asked me what my high school GPA was or what my college GPA was or even what I majored in college. They don't care. They don't care at all.
Yeah, so key. And the other thing, Tim, too, is for some people listening, I know not everybody listening has the desire to be an entrepreneur, to start their own business, or to even be like a freelancer. Some people legitimately, they have a dream 9-to-5 job. And really at that point, after you say got and helped your first couple of clients, you had some case studies, that would have been enough for you to get a job at any marketing agency.
Yeah, exactly. There's like in the world right now, there's a severe shortage of actual results, but we're drowning in diplomas and we're drowning in certifications. But I don't care about any of that. I mean, most of the employees I've hired in our company, they don't have college degrees, or if they do, not a single one of them has a college degree in marketing, but they're working for a marketing agency. Even myself, I was going to Bible college to be a pastor prior to getting into marketing. When I dropped out, it was actually my senior year of college, and my parents were just horrified.
Oh, no way.
Because, just the whole sunk cost fallacy, who the hell drops out their senior year of college? Like, at that point, you might as well finish, right? But on the flip side of that, what I told my parents is like, well, yeah, I'm in my senior year, but, the flip side is also true. That means it'll be super easy if I ever need to go back. And, thank God I haven't had to because I made it work. But just really beware of that sunk cost fallacy, because I think that holds so many young people back. If they're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, I mean, really at any stage, if you're in college, or even frankly, if you're in high school, if you have a great idea, just go for it. Like, do it. You can always come back and get the degree. I mean, I could launch right now into a whole rant about like economics, because I think that we're totally in a college bubble right now, just like we were in a real estate bubble of like 8-10 years ago.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think even from a purely financial perspective, if you really, really want a college degree, wait 3 or 4 or 5 years for that higher education bubble, that college bubble to pop, because I think tuition actually is going to be a lot cheaper, let's just say like 5 years from now, than it is right now, because we're totally in an asset bubble in higher education. Absolutely.
Very, very interesting point. And I think I want to pull out one more time just that point where, Tim, you said as an employer, and I will say as an employer, that when it comes to hiring people, it's all about the results. And, I've never asked somebody where they got their degree from or really even cared as much about the degree. It's all about the kind of character they have, if they're a good fit in the business, and then the kind of results they can drive, the value proposition that they have.
Yeah, the last kid that we hired, here's an example. My company is not, hiring people for, $5 an hour from India or the Philippines. Like, we're not outsourcing our work. We're all here in the States, and, we're paying like $40,000 a year plus. And the last kid I hired was awesome. I think he's 21 years old. He's from like Seattle, actually. He's a Seahawks fan, and that's unfortunate because I'm a big Vikings fan. But he's 21 years old, does not have a college degree, because he told me that he had dropped out, I think, when he was 19 or so, and he started working for a nonprofit kind of as like an intern. Mm-hmm. He just filmed some videos for them, and on the job, because they needed someone to be a photographer for this nonprofit and do basic like photography and video production, nothing super crazy, but they didn't have the money to outsource it to like a marketing firm. So he just taught himself photography and like video production and video editing so he could do it at his job. And eventually they hired him full time from being an intern to like a salaried position. And he's only 21 and I just hired him. And, we're going to be paying him over $40,000 a year. And he's 21, has no college degree, therefore no college debt whatsoever.
Right.
And I don't know if a lot of people have done the math that like if you can make $40,000 plus, and eventually get to, you're getting raises where you're making $50,000 a year or even $60,000 a year and beyond. And you can do that at age 21 or 22 without any student loan debt. It takes a long time for someone who went to college and maybe has like $50,000 of student loans to pay off. It takes a long time for them to catch up with you.
Yeah.
If you start investing some of that early on, whether, it's in a mutual fund, a 401k, maybe you buy some rental real estate you're investing in, like whatever. I'm not here to talk about investments, but it puts you in a great position when you have surplus income like that every month at that age. And you're not using all your money just to service debt payments, like a student loan payment.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty sad because most people in their 20s, and, I work in the real estate market. Obviously, my company platform is like a real estate marketing agency. So we work with some top realtors around the country, and essentially they hire us to be their online marketing department. So I'm following this. And one thing that's really actually affecting the national housing industry right now is that millennials are not buying houses. And it's not really a demographic thing or a cultural thing, because there's a lot of commentators that are like, they have a degree in sociology and they're ranting about, well, that's just because like millennials,
Right.
They want more flexibility or they like the apartment living downtown. It's like, no. Millennials can't buy houses because they literally can't afford houses because they have student loan debt. When you buy a house, there's something called your DTI ratio that the lender will look at. It's the debt to income ratio. And usually if you're going to qualify for a mortgage, your DTI can't exceed 40%. So that means, just for ease of math, if you're making $1,000 a month, you can't have any more than $400 a month of debt payments.
Right.
So that means even if you have no credit card debt, no car loan, your student loan payments might be $400 a month,
Easy. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So I know friends personally that have $900 a month in student loans from their undergrad. Okay. So you can see how even if you have a pretty good job, and you're making, let's say, $40,000 a year, right? Which is like what? $3,400 a month gross before taxes, something like that. Mm-hmm. If you have, let's say, $500 a month of student loan debt, you have a $400 car payment, and you have $200 a month, of that's on your credit card, let's say, you already have over $1,000 a month of debt payments you have to service, and that puts you already at like a third, like a 33% DTI. So basically, the only mortgage you could afford technically is going to be like, a $400 a month mortgage, which is not enough to buy a house basically anywhere in the U.S. Yeah. So the reason that most millennials can't afford to buy a house is because of student loan debt.
Starting out at that disadvantage, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me why you would put yourself through that.
No, absolutely correct, and that's why I appreciate. Really organizations like Praxis so much.
Praxis is amazing.
They're just a bridge over that pitfall that college can be. Now, Tim, you'd mentioned that your parents had a really tough time with that transition. Can you speak briefly about that and maybe give any advice for anybody who's experiencing the same?
Well, really, it was my whole family. It wasn't just my parents. It was my aunts and uncles, even my grandparents, honestly, because I was always a pretty bright, ambitious kid growing up. Like, people knew I was going to be fairly successful in whatever I went into, Yeah. I was in the extracurriculars in high school. I played sports in high school. I got really good grades. I was one of those kids, I mean, I'm not trying to sound arrogant or cocky, but like I was one of those kids where when someone looked at me when I was 17 or 18, they're like, oh, he's probably going to have a great career in something, right? So pretty much all my aunts and uncles are entrepreneurs or professionals or small business owners. So, when they looked at me at age 18, they're like, hey, Tim's really persuasive. He's a logical thinker. He's smart. He should go to law school. So my dad was really pushing me to go on the law school track. And, obviously I got to my senior year of college, and I decided this is stupid. I'm never going to use any of this information again. I'm writing papers on topics I don't care about. I'm reading, books that I'll never read again. And I was actually reading much more outside of school than I was in school, because the stuff I was reading in school was so boring to me. For basically since high school, I've probably averaged reading 2 books a week. The vast majority of those books are nonfiction, talking about marketing or business or something in that realm. But
right.
And I dropped out, and my family was just devastated because they thought that Tim was going to be this like prestigious member of the family who goes on to like join a law firm and becomes a partner in the law firm or something like prestigious like that, right? My dad had grown up dirt poor. So, I mean, he was so poor growing up, he told me stories that his family literally could not afford toilet paper. So there were like textured pages in the back of the Sears Roebuck catalog, and they would tear out those pages in the back and use it to wipe their butts when they were kids because they couldn't afford toilet paper. And he has this story. I think he was in 3rd or 4th grade, he told me. All of his clothes were hand-me-downs. His family couldn't afford to buy him clothes. He grew up in kind of the 1940s, so it was during World War II where there was rationing and everything.
Right.
And he couldn't afford clothes, so all of his clothes were from kind of the wealthier families. They would give their old clothes to my dad and his family. And one day in let's just call it 4th grade, a kid saw my dad wearing one of his old shirts, and he didn't realize that his mom had given it to my dad's family. So he thought that my dad had stole his shirt. So he went over to my dad and tried to tear the shirt off his back, and he was yelling that this kid stole my shirt, this kid stole my shirt. And it was just like a traumatic experience for my dad that left like emotional scars and emotional wounds. And even years later, he had to get counseling about it because like that event in his life just left such like emotional scarring of being poor and having everyone know it. So one thing my dad has been committed to his whole life was creating a life for us that was different than the upbringing he had. And he was just a classic scrappy American entrepreneur. My dad's owned everything from like a staffing service to an RV dealership. He started a restaurant that failed. He owned like a shipping business where basically they were a broker for like UPS and FedEx. I mean, totally a bunch of unrelated businesses. He's just an entrepreneur, and he did not have a college degree. So I think that's one thing he's always been insecure about is that he grew up, he would have graduated college around like 1960 had he went to college, but instead he joined the Navy. So this was right when the culture was really starting to kind of push people into going to college. It was around the 1950s, 1960s where it became a cultural thing that if you don't go to college, you're a loser, right? So my dad was determined that his kids would go to college just to kind of prove society wrong that, hey, I didn't have the upbringing necessary to go to college, but, damn it, my kids will go to college. And so even though, like, my dad ended up being a self-made millionaire because of all his businesses, he always had that insecurity that he never went to college. So he wanted, me to go to college so he could basically live vicariously through me. Because if I could go to college and get a college degree or, go to law school, that would make him feel like he succeeded in life as a father.
Yeah.
And so when I dropped out, I mean, when I said it was devastating, like I mean it. Like that's not hyperbole. He was like, oh my gosh, I worked so hard my whole life, and my idiot son Tim is going to throw it away by dropping out. And he gave me lectures too about, don't you realize how you're setting an awful example for your younger brother and your younger sister, because now they're going to think it's okay to drop out, and they're going to go be idiots too, just like you. And what's kind of cool, actually, is that my younger brother, who's 2 years younger than me, he actually did follow my path. He saw that I was successful when I had dropped out. He dropped out too. He taught himself a lot about marketing just like I did, and I ended up hiring him. And today he's like the COO of my company. He basically runs the company. Like he's the reason I'm able to be doing this podcast with you in the middle of a weekday for me and not, like running my business, as my younger brother is essentially running the company with all the employees that now report to him. So, I mean, I had to I had to overcome a lot of adversity, I guess, at home in the sense of just people judging me for dropping out.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that I don't know if I was prepared for how strong it was going to be. But a piece of advice for anyone who's listening to this is a way to get rid of a lot of the friction of when you drop out is to already have a skill set ready to go. So a lot of people drop out not knowing what they want to do. They think they're going to backpack Europe or they're going to take a gap year. And I have friends like from high school that decided to drop out and they're like, oh, I just want to find myself. And then they moved back home and they're working at like a grocery store in the butcher shop for $12 an hour, and I'm like, hey, that's great that you dropped out, dude. But like, I don't think you're going to find yourself working for $12 an hour at a grocery store back in our hometown. Like that's, that to me is not progress, So if you're going to drop out, don't drop out into a void, or into a vacuum. Like drop out because you have a specific plan for what you're going to do. And that may be you're going to backpack Europe. Like that would constitute a plan, right? But don't drop out and just think, oh, I'm going to go hang out at home, with my parents and try to find myself or whatever. Because that was the one thing that I think gave my parents at least a glimmer of hope, is they knew that when I dropped out, like I had a plan. I was going to hustle my way and like make myself an entrepreneur. And to give them credit, like I probably sound like I'm ragging on them and my parents are all, evil, but to give them credit, the greatest gift they ever gave me was they had started an educational savings account for me when I was, born, I think.
Yeah.
And by the time I was 18, I think it had like, I don't know, $5,000 in it or something like that. Like my dad had actually forgotten about it. He had set it up way back when I was born and he actually forgot about it. So when I went to create my first like business banking account when I was, 20 or 21, because I was launching my business when I dropped out, right. I went to the bank that I knew my family used and I said, hey, I'm Tim Chermak. I want to create like a checking account for my business. And then they said, oh, Tim, just so you know, you have a CD that's in your name. And, you might want to check that out. They just kind of told me nonchalantly. I was like, oh, okay, well, how much is in it? They're like, about $5,000. I was like, what? because it was set so that when I turned 18, like that money was transferred to me. And so obviously, like I knew that this wasn't my money because I had never made a $5,000 like deposit into this bank. So I called my dad and I was like, what is this? And then he's like, oh, that's right. Like way back in the early 1990s when I was born, I created like an educational savings account for you and I forgot about it. So that's yours, I guess, technically. But keep in mind, I just dropped out of college and, $5,000, maybe it was $4,000, but it was something like that. That's not going to get you a lot of tuition anyways. Right. And so with my dad's permission, I said, hey, like I understand that this is really not my money. I don't feel entitled to it because, it's money that you saved for me. So I asked his permission. I said, can I spend this on just buying books on Amazon in topics that interest me? And so that's what I did. So basically from age, 20 to let's just say 24, maybe 23 or 24 is when that money finally ran out. I just bought every book on Amazon in any topic I was interested in. So sometimes it was a book about philosophy, like Greek history. Sometimes it was a book about the Civil War if I was interested in reading about the Battle of Gettysburg. I bought a ton of books on marketing and small business marketing and leadership and management strategies and lead generation. And today I have a library in my house of like over 900 books. And I'm 25. So I like to tell people kind of like smugly that I've probably read more books than people who have like an MBA or like a graduate degree in really anything. So I would say the greatest educational investment, or really actually the greatest educational decision that I ever made that impacted my development in education was my parents giving me this checking account that had a couple $1,000s in it and allowing me to just buy books on Amazon with that money. So I got a debit card and I linked that debit card, to that checking account that had the money in it. And I just synced that debit card with my Amazon Prime account. And, if I stumbled upon some blog article about, the idea of customer retention and lifetime value or something, like immediately I would go on Amazon and I'd find 5 books that talk about the concept of lifetime value and customer retention and customer loyalty. And I'd order the top 5 books on that topic. And after reading 5 books about something, you actually become somewhat of an expert relative to the average person. So if you multiply that by, the hundreds and hundreds of books I was able to purchase with that money, that's really how I gave myself a marketing education. So, rather than going to some, school and taking on $50,000 of student loan debt or $75,000 of student loan debt, I was able to give myself what I consider a world-class marketing education for literally a couple $1,000s just by ordering books on Amazon.
Yeah, and the greatest part about that I hear, Tim, is that as soon as you learned it, you were able to actually put it into practice to drive real-world results. And I think I talk a lot on the show about a concept called just-in-time learning, which I feel is there's not as much information out there as I would like on the subject, but essentially what you see in college and in high school, and you touched on this a bit, is it's a lot of just-in-case learning versus just-in-time learning is the concept where you only learn things in the context of pursuing personal goals you've set for yourself and driving real world results and moving the ball down the field. Learning anything else other than for that purpose is for recreational purposes and should be looked at that way. Yeah.
So a really good example of just-in-time learning. And by the way, this happened well before I'd ever heard the term just-in-time learning. It just naturally occurred to me.
So you've heard the term before, was it recently? Or?
Yeah, I think actually Isaac, I heard it from Isaac Morehouse over at Praxis. But, this is 2-3 years ago. Like I had never heard that term before. It just made intuitive sense to me to learn something when I had a reason to learn it, right?
Right.
So my first ever client, I said, was a local realtor, and she was really struggling. She was in a small town, and she was like the number 47th realtor in her association, and there's only like 60 realtors in the entire association. So she was very near the bottom, not making any money. And after working with me for 2 years, she's now basically the number 1 realtor in her market. She's the top producer in her entire company in the state of Minnesota. And so that's when I realized, hey, I'm actually pretty good at real estate marketing. I took her from being a nobody to literally being the top producer in her entire company, like statewide.
Wow.
But my very first meeting with her, I didn't know anything about the real estate industry, right? Like I knew the generals of marketing principles and lead generation and kind of, local small business marketing strategies, but I didn't know anything about the specific context of real estate or how that would, be applied to a realtor's business. Mm-hmm. So naturally, what I did is I just went on Amazon and I searched for like realtor books. I probably actually just typed in realtor books. And I found like the top 3 or 4 bestsellers. There's a really popular book that I swear to God every real estate agent has read. It's called like the $1 Million Real Estate Agent by Gary Keller. He's one of the co-founders of Keller Williams. And I've found since then that pretty much every real estate agent out there has read that book. So I bought that book, obviously. I read it. I saw there was a sequel to that book. I bought that book, read it too. And there's a couple other books I found that look similar. I bought those and read those too. So by the time I had my first meeting with this realtor up in Minnesota, like I already was fairly an expert on what the status quo was anyways of the real estate industry in terms of marketing. So I could actually have an intelligent conversation with her when we talked about what she's been doing, is it working? So I think that really helped me land her as my first client, because she really understood that I understood what the real estate industry was like. And that literally just came from going on Amazon and finding what are the top selling books that realtors are buying. And I bought those and read them. I mean, you would be shocked how much of an expert you can become in any field of your choosing. Maybe it's not marketing. Maybe you're super into accounting. If you just find 3 best-selling books on that topic and read them, you will probably know more than 95% of people on that topic. So that's my advice for anything. I mean, that's what I did when I built my company. When I started hiring employees, I didn't know anything about hiring employees or management or leadership. So guess what I did? I went on Amazon and bought books on those topics. I went on YouTube and searched for maybe any TED Talks or any speeches or presentations that had been given on those topics, and I just taught myself. I mean, it literally applies to anything.
Tim, do you typically read like hardcover books, or do you listen to audio books?
Yeah, totally. I only read like physical books. I hate the idea of having a Kindle. I don't own one because I'm a very tactile person, and just maybe it's an arrogant sense of pride. I like seeing a stack of books that I've read. So
okay. Something really tangible. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very proud of like the library I have, and I like looking at it because I'm like, hey, damn, I've read all those books.
All that knowledge is in your head.
So,
yeah.
It's probably pure arrogance, but that's how I roll.
And for those of you listening too, the amazing thing about 2016 and beyond is that books are great. I also understand that people have different learning styles. And so what you said, Tim, with YouTube is a huge resource. And then, speaking of video or just online courses are huge too. You've got resources like Udemy and lynda.com and I don't know, Code Academy and podcasts. Yeah, exactly. So there's so many ways, alternative ways to learn literally whatever you need to learn to further your personal goals. And it's just sad that what's expected still and the default position is still this cult of college mindset. Because Tim, I remember, speaking of marketing, I mean, you'd get a laugh out of this. The class that I was taking when I dropped out was a marketing class, and the gal that was teaching it at our local community college here, she wasn't a marketer. She'd never had anything to do with marketing. She'd never owned a business.
Right.
And she was literally just reciting from a textbook. And it was at that point, like you said, it was just intuitive. I was like,
I actually only took one marketing class my entire college career. Like, I didn't major in marketing. All my marketing knowledge and business knowledge is, self-taught. But I took one marketing class, and it was so awful. I changed my major to like econ and finance. Yeah. Because I was like, I'm never going to do marketing for a living if this is what marketing is.
And just the fact that a lot of these curriculums at these universities, they go through months and sometimes a few years before they're approved to be taught. By that time, the industry's changed so much, or marketing specifically has changed so much. A lot of the information is no longer relevant. And
I would get killed in my business with Platform. That's my company. I would get killed if we didn't update things for a year. I mean, we're making constant tweaks and split tests and testing out new campaigns and experimenting with new ideas. I mean, like, not even every month, but every week.
Yeah.
Like, it's just unfathomable that you could go that long without, updating. And
that's phenomenal. I mean, it doesn't get much more logical than that. I mean, anybody listening who's interested in marketing or maybe taking any sort of marketing class, just knowing that the material you're probably reading right now took, upwards of a year or more to get approved, and now it's in the system for probably several years before they update it, and you're listening to a guy that owns his own marketing agency, and they have to keep things updated, even sooner than a year.
Yeah, I mean, if you're specifically interested in sales or marketing or advertising or, anything in that, like, just go find a marketing company and work for them for a year. Don't go to college. I cannot actually think of a single profession or specialty or anything in that kind of industry that would require a college degree in marketing or a college degree in advertising or management or anything like that. I mean, really, I think when people look at going to college, they always make a comparison against nothing. And what I mean by that is, like you've obviously heard like people say that, oh, if you have a 4-year degree, that you'll make $1 million more over your lifetime, right?
Yeah, those statistics are everywhere.
Yeah, it's just an absurd thing to say because, yeah, that's true. I'm not saying it's not necessarily true, but what you're saying is someone who started with, let's say, $50,000 of capital, which they obviously invested into college tuition, will make $1 million more over their lifetime. What they're not including is, okay, but if someone doesn't go to college and they spent that $50,000 on something else,
right,
what would that look like? So they're not really looking at the opportunity cost. And it's actually quite amusing to me that people who are supposedly educated are the ones who keep making that statement, because it's a meaningless thing to say. Like, I mean, as I said, the most recent person that I hired in my company, I think he's like 21 years old. He's from Seattle. He has like 3 legit years of marketing experience as kind of like the media coordinator at a nonprofit organization out in Seattle. And he does not have a college degree, but he has 3 years of actual experience doing video production and some social media marketing and video editing. And like, I hired him in a heartbeat. And at the end of the interview, after I had already decided I was going to hire him, it was actually like a phone interview. I was like, by the way, what was your high school GPA? And we just both started laughing because we both realized like how ludicrous of a question that was, because we had just spent like an hour talking about what he had actually produced and what he had actually created in the real world. And then I decided to throw that in there, like, oh, by the way, John, what was your high school GPA? And like we literally just both started laughing because in the moment, like it was such a hilarious thing to ask. But that's actually what a lot of interviews ask you in your first job, which to me is insane.
Yeah, and I would say that the trend is moving away from that, especially with all these newer startups, and a lot of these startups are started by either dropouts or people have been through the system and don't see the merit of it. And so I think that trend is going away when you see companies like Google hiring 19-year-olds out of high school because they developed some apps and have real world experience. Leading companies like that. I think there's a lot of evidence of a trend there.
And I will say too that I think the tech sector, in terms of like information technology, software development and building apps and doing web design, like don't get caught into the trap of thinking that if I'm not a programmer or if I'm not really good with, tech, that I can't start a business or that I can't drop out.
Oh yeah.
Because that's often the narrative is that, oh, you can only drop out if you're like a boy genius programmer.
No, yeah.
And I don't know a thing about programming. Like I don't know anything about HTML. Like nothing. Like I wouldn't be able to build a website with one of those template things. I don't know anything about that, but I own a marketing company now that has 7 employees because I just aligned myself with people who do.
Yeah.
So if you have an idea for a business, or maybe you're not even an entrepreneur, maybe you want to be an accountant. Let's go with something that I would consider like a really boring profession, like an accountant. And I say boring because I hate it so much that I think accountants should be like saints. Like they're really doing the Lord's work. Like that
Agreed.
The idea that there's people out there who actually enjoy doing bookkeeping, accounting, that's like a Christian miracle to me. So, let's say you want to be an accountant, right? And you're like, oh, I'm going to go major in accounting for 4 years and rack up 50 grand of student loan debt. I guarantee you could go to Barnes and Noble and just buy 4 or 5 books on accounting and teach yourself how to be an accountant from those books. If you are smart enough to get a 4-year degree in accounting, you are smart enough to go read 4 or 5 books on accounting, teach yourself, save yourself 4 years of your life, save yourself $50,000, go get a job somewhere as a bookkeeper. Yeah, it probably won't pay a lot because you don't have a college degree, right? But if you make $13 or $14 or $15 an hour kind of in a low-level bookkeeping position, and you prove that you know what you're doing, very quickly you will get promoted, and all of a sudden you'll be making $17 or $18 an hour And then you'll get promoted. If you keep learning and proving you're competent, you'll be making $20 an hour and $30 an hour. And I can say this because that's exactly what my wife did last year.
Oh, really? For accounting?
Yeah. Our business needed an accountant, and we did not have the money to hire one. So my wife, who actually already had a college degree, but her college degree was in pre-law because she was going to go to law school. But we just both decided that, we want her eventually to be able to stay home and homeschool our kids. So I didn't really want her going off to law school, because if she was going to have a career as a lawyer, that wasn't really compatible with me having a business, because I'm not going to stay home all day because I have a company to run. But anyways, long story short, we had this talk and we're like, hey, like our business needs an accountant. Why don't you just teach yourself accounting? So like I remember vividly us going to Barnes and Noble together, buying like, I think it was $150 worth of books. It was like 4 or 5 books on accounting. She taught herself accounting, and she's been doing all of our bookkeeping, all of our records, all of even like our tax accounting and things like that, like since. And no one taught her. Never once did she even have a mentor or anything like that. She just taught herself purely from reading books that were available at a retail Barnes and Noble.
Wow.
Okay. So, now she has technically years of experience as an accountant. Like if she wanted to, she could go get a job somewhere as an accountant because she knows what she's doing, and that's something she taught herself for literally $150 and just putting in the time. So, I mean, there's not a doubt in my mind that you couldn't do that. If you're 19 or 20, just go read some books about a topic, start low on the ladder, work your way up, and like competence is your best friend. Your best job security is competence. Like that, I really do believe that.
Phenomenal word, man. And now, so moving along here to just the lightning round here. What is a personal habit that you believe contributes to your success, Tim?
2 things. I do not work on weekends if at all possible. I really try to give myself the weekends to just like reflect, hang out, go to the beach, just read books. I go to a lot of movies. I often see 1 or even 2 movies a week in theaters. So I don't work weekends because as an entrepreneur, it's really great having a break. The other thing I started doing actually about a month ago, that's been incredible, is I go to the gym every morning now and I just like shoot hoops for a half hour or 45 minutes. It's not any like insane workout like I'm doing CrossFit or P90X or anything stupid like that. I'm literally just going to my local LA Fitness and I'm casually shooting hoops for maybe half hour or something, just to mildly work up a sweat. And having that start my day as an entrepreneur just clears my head. It gets my blood flowing, gets the endorphins going. And that's like a habit I don't think I'll ever give up. It's been incredible.
What's a quality that you have that you would consider essential to being an entrepreneur?
That is a really good question. I think the number one quality I have in hindsight that's made a difference. I didn't always realize it at the time, but I'm bold. I'm willing to make a big ask of someone, and like earlier when we raised our price to $1,500 a month, like we shifted from being a $300 a month software service to a $1,500 a month marketing firm. And that was we told all of our clients that, and we didn't keep a single client. We lost every single one of those clients.
Yeah, that's bold.
But obviously, all we needed was 1 client at $1,500 to equal 5 clients at $300. So I think boldness and just being willing to be told no and not take it personally.
What book would you recommend to us and why?
I would read The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. It has a very exaggerated title and it sounds like hyperbole. And, frankly, when you see the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, like the cover of it has like a guy on a hammock on the beach. And it totally looks like one of those just kind of bullshit, self-helpy nonsense fluff books. But it is the greatest book on entrepreneurship and building a business I think I've ever read. And I can say that from someone who has like I have over 900 books in my house. And I think that is the top book on entrepreneurship and just being effective at life in general. When my sister graduated high school, she was taking a class on entrepreneurship, and they actually had me come speak. And I bought every kid in the class a copy of that book. I think I think everyone should do the 4-work week, even if you're not an entrepreneur, even if you're an employee. It will give you absolutely fantastic perspective on how to actually create a life and like design the life that you want rather than just letting life happen to you. So it's absolutely just as relevant for employees as it is to entrepreneurs. So it's the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, absolutely. Reading that book completely changed my mindset. And again, I don't know if it's realistic for everybody to think or even get to the point where they're just working 4 hours a week. And I don't think that's really the point of the book. It was more a mindset that I walked away with. That is the reason, where I'm at today. So
Exactly.
Tim, what's an internet resource like Evernote that you would recommend to us?
I would not be able to exist on a daily basis without Slack. Slack, if you don't know, it's like a chat app that a lot of businesses use now.
Yeah.
It's probably cut down on my email communication with my team by like 80 to 90% because we just use Slack. So now my inbox isn't full of emails from, my employees, my team members. Really all I get emails every day are from clients if a client has a question or something. And all of our communication happens right in Slack. Slack, it's basically like the old like MSN Messenger, like if you remember that, but it's a private, chat room just for employees in your company. It's actually free. And all the messages are encrypted. So it's actually much more secure than sending something over Gmail. So, if I have a client's personal data that, let's say, I wouldn't want to send that over a Gmail email, like I would just send it to one of my employees in Slack because it's encrypted. So, Slack is incredible.
Cool.
I think it's actually the fastest company ever to reach $1 billion like valuation too.
No way. I've been hearing a lot about them, and you're not the first to recommend that. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. So last two questions here, Tim. What parting piece of advice would you have for any of our listeners who are thinking of dropping out, possibly to pursue entrepreneurship, but they haven't quite made that step yet? Just some parting advice.
Yeah. So this is true whether or not you have any interest in entrepreneurship. Like maybe you totally do not want to be a business owner. You just want to have like an awesome job that pays a lot, with like a steady paycheck every month. Like maybe you just want to be in a job that you love. My advice is going to be the same. It's get really good at a specific skill, because getting good at that specific skill is your ticket to dropping out. That's going to be your job security, is that you're really good at doing one specific thing that'll allow you to get a paycheck for it or start a company around it. So for me, what that thing initially was Facebook ads. I taught myself how to be, I would consider basically a world expert at Facebook ads. And I don't just mean randomly boosting posts I'm talking about like I got really good at running split tests and using the finer points of the Facebook ads manager and, running ads to different demographics and split testing landing pages. And so I taught myself how to use Facebook ads, and that has made me hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So figure out a specific skill set, because saying, I'm good at business, that's not a specific skill set. Like teach yourself accounting like my wife did, and then boom, there's no reason you won't be making $40,000 a year like most accountants do, or even $50,000 a year. You can teach yourself the specific skill set of accounting, or teach yourself the specific skill set of web design, or just find a specific skill set that you enjoy doing, because that skill set takes all the fear out of dropping out, because you know that you can find a job around that skill set, or start a business with that skill set. So the number one mistake I see people make who drop out is they drop out into a vacuum or into a void, and they don't have a specific skill set that will allow them to make money when they drop out.
And what advice do you have for any of our listeners who've already dropped out and who are already on their entrepreneurial journey, or perhaps learning that specific skill?
Yeah. So if you're an entrepreneur, get really, really clear on your business model. And I would say, like, if making sales, again, if you're an entrepreneur, if making sales doesn't seem kind of easy to you, where like once you find a customer who's a good fit for you, they immediately sign up because they love your product or they love your service, you probably need to change your product or service. Like sales and marketing, frankly, should not have a lot of friction. Like if it's really hard for your business, to make sales, or it's really hard for your business to get more customers or get more clients, it's actually probably not a sales or marketing problem. You have something wrong with your actual product or service. So it took me 2 years to figure this out, and that we needed to change our business model entirely. So that would be my advice if you've already dropped out. If you're not an entrepreneur and you've already dropped out, build that skill set. Figure out a skill set that you can monetize, and then attend events in that industry, network with people in that industry, read books about that industry. Again, I mean, it's shocking what results you can create in the real world if you have initiative and a proactive mindset. Like if you're 21 years old, let's say, and if you're 21 years old and you want to go work at an accounting firm, and you see most of the staff accountants are, let's say, being paid $20 an hour, which roughly, if you're making $20 an hour, that equates to about $40,000 a year. And you're like, hey, that's great, but I want to be making $60,000 a year, which is about $30 an hour. All that you have to do is find a way that you can be worth more to that company than the $30 an hour they're going to pay you. So you can't just come in early and stay late. You have to find new ways of creating value. Look for inefficiencies in the business. Is there some process in the business that's really inefficient that you could fix? Is there, something that the clients of that accounting firm want that, that your business isn't currently providing to them that you could provide to them? Maybe they want a PDF report emailed to them automatically, every week about where their numbers are at for their bookkeeping. But maybe that takes a bunch of time. You could, quick write some program that would automate the process and send it to them. I guarantee you, if you basically treat your job like an entrepreneur and you don't just clock in and clock out at certain hours of the day, but you're actually proactively looking at creative ways to add value above and beyond what you're being paid for, like, you will get paid more. Like, you will get promoted, you'll get raises. It's just that most people think that getting a raise is a function of how long they've worked at a company, and that's bullshit. If in the 5th year that you've worked at a company, you're still doing the exact same thing you did in the 1st year that you worked at that company, why the hell would they pay you more? Because what you've actually proven is that they could hire a brand new person who will do the same thing as you, for probably actually less money, right? So
Right.
All you have to do to get raises is find ways to creatively add value to the client, to that business's clients or to the business itself, and you'll get raises. I mean, it may sound arrogant, it may sound cocky, but I really think it is not hard to make $50,000 a year or $60,000 a year, frankly, in any profession. It's just that people aren't doing the mental work of finding out how to be that valuable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, perfect. Makes perfect sense, man. And the great word. Thanks for sharing that.
That's even if you're 20 or 19 or 21. I'm not saying you have to be 30 years old to make a decent salary. If you're 19 years old listening to this, there is absolutely no reason you can't make a very solid salary. You just need to put in the hard mental work of figuring out how you can be incredibly, incredibly valuable at the company you're at.
What's the best way that people can connect with you?
Actually, my personal email address is just timchermak@gmail.com. So it's timchermak@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook. Just search Tim Chermak. Again, timchermak. And again, I'm the author of 2 books now, actually, Main Street Marketing and High Hanging Fruit.
Yep, and we'll put links to those in the description as well. And, successful dropouts, you've been hanging out with Tim and Kylan, learning what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. For everything we talked about today, head over to successfuldropout.com and type Tim into the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And as always, stay hungry, stay foolish.